Okay, welcome to the third of my 3 videos on subprograms. Well done if you've made it this far. This video is going to focus on what are functions and procedures, why do we use them, and then some practical experience. You can have a go at writing some functions and procedures in pseudocode. I've also done a couple in Python as well, so you can try them out if you want to, and then we'll finish off with some exam style questions. So let's get cracking on this. So to start off with, let's just look at the difference between a procedure and a function. So if you look on the left hand side, we've got a procedure. On the right hand side, we've got a function. So again, this is pseudocode here. I'm using the Cambridge GCSE pseudocode, which it's pseudocode, so it doesn't really matter. And if you have a different pseudocode, that's absolutely fine, as long as you're consistent with the way that you write it. But anyway, let's look at this one. So you can see that, first of all, the main difference is that the function has a return here. So what this means is that we've got this local variable answer that we know from what we talked about before, that when this function, in this case, when it finishes, any local variables are deleted from RAM. But for this one, we're actually returning the variable or the value that the variable answer is pointing to or storing. We're returning it back to the main program. That's the main difference. The other sort of key differences are that instead of the word procedure, we've got the word function. So we've got function and then end function instead of procedure and end procedure. And also in this function here, in this version of pseudocode, we're actually specifying the return data type. So this one is returning an integer. You don't normally do this, particularly if you use Python. Python doesn't need you to write the return data type. Python will simply figure out what data type you're returning. But anyway, we've got it here, and I've included it in case you see it in an exam question, so you know that in our sort of first line in the definition of our function, we can actually say the data type. I think if you were asked to write a function and you didn't put it, I don't think it would cost you any marks at all, as long as you make sure you've got the return and the word function. Okay, so that's the main differences between the two. You're going to get some chance to practice these shortly. So now the other just slight difference quickly is for the procedure, we're using the word call, which I don't really think it matters if you have it or don't. The important thing is that you have the name of the procedure, and in the brackets you've got your arguments, which we're going to pass to the parameters, and we've done that in the previous video. The difference with the function is because we're returning a value to the main program, we actually need to create a new variable that's going to store that value. So here, new answer is going to be assigned add34. So add34 is our function call. We pass our arguments to our function. We're going to add them, do our thing, output answer, and then we're going to return the value, which is 7, because we've added 3 and 4, and answer is our local variable. So we're going to return 7 to the main program, and what happens is add34, it will be replaced with the return value. Then that return value can be assigned or stored with this variable new answer. Then the rest of the program can access that, and we can do stuff with it. So if there was a return, the subprogram is a function. That's a key point. This means we can return a local variable to the rest of our code. A return value can be used by the whole program. If there is no return, such as this one here on the left hand side, then it's a procedure. Procedures do not return any values to the whole program. So we get a chance to practice some of these as we go through this video. So have a look at these 4 programs. If you can figure out if they are functions or procedures, pause the video, have a look at them, press play, and we'll talk about the answers. So in the first one, we do have the word function here, but I can see that we have a return, and it's returning something, so it has to be a function. We've got the word procedure, and I can't see the word return, so this has to be a procedure. So in this one, I can't see return anywhere, so that means it has to be a procedure. And also you can actually use proc, short for procedure. And in this one, I can see I've got create function, but I also have return. I'm returning something to the main program as well. So this one has to be a function. Okay, so that was a nice little exercise. Hopefully that was okay. So in terms of a theory question of, why should you use subprograms, procedures and functions, we've talked about some of this in some of the previous videos, but we can summarize some of the main points here. So we can reuse code. Code's going to be shorter. We're not repeating code. We decompose code. So decomposition of code means breaking it up into smaller parts or more understandable steps. So that's the second one, and then the last one I've got is the code's more maintainable, and that's a whole topic on its own. But essentially, what that means is it's easier to fix errors, it's easier for other people to understand, it's easier for people to perhaps come along and add new features. So 3 really good points there. If that was a 4-mark question, there's loads of stuff for 4 marks there. So instead of that, where we've got this long repeating code, we can essentially have something nice and short, easy to understand, easy to maintain, like that. Right, so let's go through an example together now. So we're going to write a procedure. We'll do some functions after, but let's start off with procedure. So write a procedure in pseudocode called add, which takes 2 integers, num1 and num2 as parameters. The procedure needs to add the 2 numbers and output the answer. So we'll start off defining our procedure. So we state it's a procedure, we give it a name, and in the brackets we put our parameters. So num1, num2, you can call them what you want, but they need to be meaningful, they need to make sense. So we're using 2 numbers, so num1, num2 makes sense, and we're also going to give them a data type as well, so they're integers. It does tell us in the question. Okay, so now we've got our parameters, we simply need to add them and output the answer. So we can say answer is going to be assigned num1 plus num2, and then we'll output the add and then answer. So that's our procedure finished. So we'll end procedure, and then I think I've just got an example here to call it. So call, we type the name of the subprogram, in this case it's a procedure, and then in brackets we put our arguments. So 3 is going to be passed num1, 4 is going to be passed num2, we're going to add them together and we're going to output 7, or add and 7. Right, so we've got the example here. So your task is to, again, pause the video and have a go at it and then press play and see the answer. Your task is to write a procedure called area square, which takes 2 integers, length and width, as parameters. The procedure needs to multiply the 2 numbers, output the area. So we start off, we've got our example here, so it's a procedure, then we need to give it a name, and then we need to put our parameters in the brackets. So the name is going to be area square, and our parameters length and width. So we can write out our first line, procedure, area square, length and width, and just tell us they're integers, but if it doesn't tell you the data type, you can usually figure out what it needs to be. So length is integer, width is integer. So the procedure needs to multiply those 2 numbers and output the area. So I'm going to create a local variable called area. I'm going to assign it the length times the width. I'm going to output it. That's us done. So we can say end procedure, and I'm just going to do an example call area square, and I'm going to send it the 2 arguments 2 and 5. So we'll say length is, the parameter length is going to be 2, parameter width will be 5, 2 times 5 is 10, we output 10, that's the area. Okay, so let's have another go at another one. So task 10, we've got our example again here. Ask the user to enter a username, write a procedure called check name, which checks if the username is equal to 123, output username already taken. So if it is equal to 123, user 123. So pause the video if you want to have a go, and then we'll check through the answers. So we're going to start off. So it tells us to ask the user to enter username. So I'm going to say output enter username, and then we're going to input the value that they type in. Now we need to create our procedure. So again, looking at the example, so we state procedure. It's going to be called check name, and we're only going to have one parameter, and that's going to be the username. So we're going to actually pass our the argument is going to be the username. We're going to pass that to the parameter username, and then we're going to check it. So let's see how we're going to check it first. So we need to see if the username is equal to user123. So I'm going to use an if statement. So if username, remember the double equals is comparison. If username is the same as user123, then output username already taken, which is what it wants us to do. So I think that's it. We can good practice. We end if and end procedure, and then now when we call this procedure check name, this time we're actually passing it the variable username. So it's perfectly acceptable. Up until now we've actually been stating values that we're passing, but an argument can be a variable. So the input username, we're simply passing the variable username now to the parameter username that we've created here. Okay, if you want to try this out, I've written it in Python here, so you can, if you just type that quickly out into, say, an online Python compiler, you can see it working, and you can try a few things with it as well if you want to. Let's have a go at another question. So, task 11, write a procedure called area triangle, which is past the base and height of a triangle, so for example 6 and 4. The procedure should work out and output the area of the triangle. So again, we can create our definition, so it's a procedure, it's going to be called area triangle, and our parameters are going to be base and height, and it doesn't specify here, but I'm just going to assume that they're whole numbers, so they're going to use integers. So what we need to do is we need to work out the area of the triangle, so it's the base times the height divided by 2. So I'm going to create a local variable called area. I'm going to assign that the base times height divided by 2, and it tells us to output the area, so I'm going to output it. And that's everything done, so we can end our procedure. And there's an example call. So call the name of the subprogram, or our procedure in this case, and then in brackets I put 2 values. Now if you wrote this out yourself, and perhaps maybe you did an input, you asked them to enter the base and enter the height, so you created 2 variables and you passed those 2 variables to the procedure, that's also perfectly fine, and well done if you did do that. But if you can get this far, you're doing really well. Okay, so we're going to have a look at functions now. So obviously functions have a slightly different pseudocode, so we're replacing the word procedure with the word function. We're also, in our first line where we're defining our function, we're telling it the data type it's returning, because if it is a function, it's going to return a value to the whole program. And then finally we have the keyword return, and we specify what we're returning. So we're returning the local variable answer in our example here. Now in this particular one, you can see we're doing the output again. So what's happening here is we're outputting the returned value when we call the function with add 4, 5. So we're calling our function with these 2 arguments. We send 4 to num1, 5 to num2. It adds them, assigns it to the variable answer. We're then returning it. And what happens is add 4, 5 here will be replaced with the returned value. So it will be replaced with 9, and we will then output that returned value. So the returned value from a function can be output. In pseudocode, we do not need to use call with a function. So we set the function name, we define the parameters, we set the data type to be returned. And if you want to have a go at this in Python, there's the Python code here, so you can pause the video, type that into a Python compiler, and you can see it. Our function here, because we've got a return, will actually, we call our function with add 4, 5. It'll process that, add 4 and 5, return 9, and then it will actually print the returned value. So you can see that working if you want to have a look at that. Okay, so try this function in Python. Okay, so example 2 is exactly the same as what we just looked at. It's just the call is slightly different, because you can see now, if I just, well, I won't go back, but on the previous one, we were just printing out the returned value, but we couldn't do anything else with it then once we printed it. But if we want to actually store the return value, we just need to create a variable and assign that the return value after the function is called. So this one will do exactly the same as the one before. So it'll call the add function, pass it these 2 arguments, 4 we pass num1, 5 we pass num2. We'll add 4 and 5. We'll store that in the local variable answer. We'll then return that, so return 9 to the main program. So the same as before, add 4, 5 will be replaced with 9, but this time 9 will be assigned to this variable, new answer. So we can actually now use that with the rest of the main program. So the return value from a function can be assigned to a new variable. And again, I've just said in pseudocode, we do not need to use call with a function. And again, here's this particular code with the return value being assigned to this variable new answer, and I've included a print, so we're actually printing out, so you can see it actually printing and working as well. Again, if you want to give that a try, please do. It says try this function in Python if you want to, and you can see how it's actually working. So let's have a go at writing a couple of these now yourself. So task 12, write a function called subintegers, which takes two integers a and b as parameters. The function needs to subtract the numbers a and b and return the result, which can be output. So we've got our example here, so let's take it one bit at a time. So first of all, we're going to do our definition. So we're going to say function, we're going to give it a name, which is subintegers. We've got our parameters, so it's telling us the parameters are integers and it's a and b, so we can set those up. And we will be returning an integer as well. If we're subtracting two integers, or we can have an integer to return. So our first line will look something like this: function subintegers ab, and we're returning an integer. Now all we need to do is to subtract these two parameters and return the result, which can then be output. So I'm going to create a new variable, a local variable called answer, assign that a minus b. So we're subtracting parameters. We're going to return this local variable to the main program. That's the end of our function. And then our call, because it tells us that we just need to output it, but if you wanted to assign it to a variable and then output it, that's perfectly fine. But I'm just writing output subintegers 5, 3. So we're going to call the subintegers function. We're going to pass it these two arguments. 5 is going to be passed to A, 3 is going to be passed to B. We'll subtract them. 5 minus 3 is 2. We'll return 2 back to the main program, and then this here, this call subintegers 5, 3 will be replaced with the return value 2, which will then be output. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Right, so again, if you want to pause the video, have a go at this one, then press play and we'll see the answer. So task 15, we've got the example there as well to go off. Write a function called largest number, which takes two numbers input by the user as parameters and returns the largest, which is then output. Okay, so we can start off with asking the user for the two numbers. So we need to ask the user, it says here, takes two numbers input by the user's parameters. So output, enter two numbers, input num1, input num2. So we've got those assigned. What we can do now is we can create our function definition. So it's a function, it's called largest number, and then in brackets we've got our two numbers. It doesn't tell us whether they're integers or not in the question. I'm just going to assume they're integers. So num1 is an integer, num2 is an integer, and if we're adding integers, then we're going to return an integer as well. So we need to find out the largest of them. So we're not adding them, actually we're finding the largest. So what we're going to do is just compare them, and we're going to figure out which one's the biggest. So something like this will do. If num1 is greater than num2, then we're going to assign our local variable largest num1, else largest is going to be num2. And we're going to end our if statement, and then we're going to return largest to the main program and end our function there. So there's our function that's going to find the largest number and return it back to the main program. I know this doesn't account for them being the same, but I just want to keep the function fairly straightforward. So all we need to know is to call our function. So I'm going to say output largest number, and then I'm going to pass it num1 and num2. So these are our arguments. Num1 is going to be passed the parameter num1, num2 is going to be passed the parameter num2. We will then work out which one's the biggest, and then we'll return this local variable largest back to the main program. And as I've said before, this call here, largest number, num1, num2, will be replaced with whatever we've returned, which can then be output. Okay, so hopefully that one was okay. Just a couple more tasks and then a few questions. So again, I haven't put the example on this one, so hopefully by now you're starting to get the idea of how to write the definition, the first line of a function or procedure. So let's have a look at this one. If you want to pause the video, have a go, press play, and we'll go through the answer. Write a function called cake share, which is passed two parameters. The first is the number of cakes, and the second is the number of people who will be eating the cakes. Your program should ask the user to input the number of cakes and the number of people before sending them to the function. The function must work out the difference and then return it so the number of cakes left can be output. So the first thing we need to do is we need to actually ask the user to input the number of cakes and the number of people. So we've done that. Now we can create our function. So it's a function. It's going to be called cake share, and we've got two parameters. The first one is the number of cakes, which is going to be an integer. So we're going to have whole cakes, and the number of people is going to be an integer as well. So we're going to keep the number of people whole. We're not going to cut people in half or anything. So we're going to have whole numbers of people, whole number of cakes, and we'll also return an integer as well because we'll be subtracting these. So if we subtract two integers, we're going to be returning an integer. So what we need to do is we need to subtract the number of people from the number of cakes. We know how many cakes will be left. So I'm creating a variable called total. Doesn't matter what you call it, but as long as it makes sense. So total is going to be the number of cakes minus the number of people. We're going to return that back to the main program because that's what we're asked to do. I'm going to end my function, and then we just need to call our function and do something with it. So I'm going to output whatever is returned. So we're going to call the cake share function, and we're passing it the number of cakes. That's our first argument, and the number of people is our second argument. So number of cakes will be assigned to the num cakes parameter, and num people will be assigned or passed to the num people integer. So we can subtract them, return, and then the call here, which is cake share, num cakes, num people, that will all be replaced with the returned value and then output. And again, like we did a couple of questions ago, we could actually create a variable and assign that the returned value and then output that new variable if we wanted to. Okay, so a couple of questions just to finish off now. So kind of these could be in some sort of exam question where you've given a procedure or function, you have to figure out what it's going to output. So if we look at this first one, we got a procedure, we're calling it with add 5 6. So I'm not going to make any assumptions, I'm going to work it through step by step. So I've got 5 and 6 are my arguments, so I'm going to pass 5 to num1, 6 to num2. I can now I'm going to add them together. So 5 plus 6, I'm going to assign that to answer. So 5 plus 6 is 11. So I'm going to output answer, the word answer, and 11. There we go. And this one is a function. I can see it's a function. It says function and it returns a value. So output add 4 5. So we've got the name of the function is add. So we're calling it. We've got an argument of 4, an argument of 5. 4 is going to be assigned to num1. 5 is going to be assigned to num2. So we add them. 4 plus 5 is 9. We assign that to answer. We return 9 back to the main program. So this function call is going to be replaced with 9. We output 9. And that's all we output. Okay, that's all good. Okay, a couple more questions. So what is the output of the following algorithms? So let's have a look. So we've got a procedure here. There's no return and it's called a procedure. So call perimeter square, which is the name of the procedure, 6 and 4. So 6 is our first argument. It's going to be passed to the height parameter. And then 4 is going to be passed to the length parameter, which is down here. It should be at the top, but it doesn't matter. We can figure it out. So perimeter is the length times 2. So the length is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, plus the height times 2, 4 times 2 is 8. So we've got 12 plus 8, which is 20, so we're going to output that. Output perimeter, that's all done. Now we've got a function. So it's a function, I can tell it's a function, it's called a function, and it returns a value as well. So output, smallest number 7, 9. So this is our call. It's the smallest number function. We're passing 7, which is our argument going to num1. 9 is our other argument going to num2. So if num1 is smaller than num2, or if num1 is less than num2, we're going to assign num1 to smallest. So 7 is less than 9, so we will assign 7 to smallest. So we don't need to do the else, we can end if. So we're going to return 7 back to the main program because 7 is that local variable smallest. So what happens is smallest number 79 will now be replaced with the returned value, which is 7, which we can output. Okay, fantastic. So we've got another sort of exam type question here. So there are two types of subprogram, functions and procedures. Complete the table below by ticking whether each feature is available in functions and or procedures. So pause the video, have a quick go, play through for the answer. Okay, so let's have a look. Do they have a subprogram name which is used to call the subprogram? So yes, they both do. Do they take 0, 1 or many parameters which are used to pass values to the subprogram? Yes, they both will take 0, 1 or many parameters which are used to pass values to the subprogram. Okay, so remember this, the arguments that are passed to the parameters, just to make that clear. Do they return a value back to the calling subprogram? Well, functions do, but procedures do not. Then the bottom one, the subprogram can be called several times in the main program. Well, that's the whole point. So we want to be able to call our function or a procedure as many times as we want. Okay, so hopefully that one is okay. Okay, this is the last question now. So well done if you have made it this far. So have a look at the function on the left hand side, that's our subprogram, and there's a few questions to answer. Pause the video, have a go, press play, and we'll see what the answers are. So give it the name of a parameter. We've got two parameters, that's num1 and num2. Those are in the brackets on the first line where we actually define our function. An argument, so good names and arguments. The arguments are the values that we actually pass to the parameters. So that's down here in our call where we're calling the smallest number function and we are going to pass it the arguments 7 and 9. Example of a local variable, so that's a variable created inside our subprogram or our function in this case, and we have the local variable smallest. State the data type of num2. So num2 and num1 are both integers. Okay, and then finally a little bit of programming theory. An example of assignment. So we've got smallest assign num1 if num1 is less than num2, that's assignment, and then selection is all to do with making a choice. So that's if num1 is less than num2. And that's the end of this video. So if you have made it this far, it's a bit longer than I wanted it to be, but hopefully it's given you a really good understanding of subprograms, why we use them, and then functions and procedures and how they work. So thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been useful, and see you in the next video.